All right. Well, welcome, Bob, to Drunk Comics.
Thank you. So, oh, wait a minute.
Yes, cheers.
Cheers.
And I just want to draw attention to the fact that Corellia is drinking from my Batman cup that we have now realized has 10 abs.
10 abs. She thought it was
10
8.
abs.
And I
That
was
is
like,
the
boy,
goal.
I have news for you. 2, 4, 6, 8.
That's
10.
the goal. 10.
Okay. So,
Technically,
bad news
I think
in
those are
that,
facts.
yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. So I can't count.
Okay, Kelly can count. I'm just so
I'm
drunk
not.
that I can't tell the difference between abs and pecs. It's
Thank you,
fine.
Bob. I was so worried
Hey.
that I count.
10 pack is the goal.
No, a 10 pack should not be the goal for anyone. That's not helpful. All right. So, Bob, where are you from?
Well, that's a very good question. Because there's several answers. Currently, I reside in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, which is just outside Denver. Before I came to Colorado, I lived in Texas for a number of years in a dinky little town called Navasota, which is about 60 miles from Houston. Before that, I lived in Hawaii and Maryland, and I was actually born in Hawaii a long, long time ago. So take your pick.
No, not that long ago. You don't look that. You look great. All right.
Oh,
So
thank
how'd you get into comics and superheroes?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I told you I lived in Maryland. That was we moved from Hawaii to Maryland right after I was born, and we lived there until I was about 6. And so my very first memories of superheroes and things like that were coming home from school in the afternoon and watching reruns of the Adam West Batman. So Adam West and Batman were my first introduction into comics. And so then I basically was a Batman fan, forever. And I my very first costume, my mother made for me when I was 6 years old, and it was Robin. And she actually made that. She had an issue of Teen Titans from back in the '60s, and she took that and took Robin and made the costume, and that was actually my first costume. And then I've just been a Batman fan ever since.
So did your mom help with your costumes at all once you started cosplaying?
Before she passed away several years ago, but before she did, I actually had asked her, I said, can you teach me how to sew? And so she started teaching me how to sew. And so probably it was probably, I'm 3 or 4 years into it. But so she showed me a lot of different things. And actually I will show you this. Because we are down in my cave, which is also my sewing room. But hang on. So here on my sewing table is Grover. And Grover, I bought this for my mother for Christmas when I was 7 or 8. And when she passed, my dad asked me if there was anything that I would like to have and I said, yes, I'd like Grover. And so Grover sits down here on my sewing table with me. So whenever I do a project, it's like she's there with me and helping me. And whenever I get irritated or because something's not working, Grover's always there to help me kind of get through it. So there you go. So yes.
That's so sweet. I love it. So what comic are you here to talk about today?
Well, okay. So I am here today to share with you my insights on Watchmen.
Yeah.
Now, if you ask me for my opinion, which most people don't, but if
Well, we are.
if you ask me for my opinion, there are basically three comic stories that really changed the way comic books were viewed in the mid to late 80s. And those stories were Watchmen, The Dark Knight Returns, and The Killing Joke. So because
Alan Moore.
I think we've already had somebody talk about The Dark Knight and or The Dark Knight Returns. So Watchmen has always been one of my very favorite stories, just simply because there's so much to it. There's so much history behind it, and there's so much. I've read Watchmen. I can't even remember when I got this copy of it. This is not my first copy of Watchmen, but I have read this story. I've lost count of the number of times that I've read this story, and I have found that every time I read it, I find something new that I missed earlier, or something just occurred to me as and so that is one of the things that I love about the story, is that if you're a novice comic book person, you can read the story, and it's a great story. I won't say it's wonderful, because it can be very depressing and has a lot of stuff going on, but it's a great story just if you don't know anything about comics. If you are a student of comics, you're going to pick out things where where things are familiar and things are different. If you're a real, hardcore comic person, you're going to find little nuances and little things that you go, oh wow, I didn't catch that before, or that that's something completely new to me. So when we started talking about doing this, and I started thinking about how in the world I was gonna talk about this, because it is such a massive thing. I said, okay, we're gonna. Oh, so I guess I should show you. I have notes.
I love it.
I have like 10 pages of notes, because we're doing this, and I'm going to forget things. So, and if anybody who's watching this who has met me before or has talked to me in the least, I tend to ramble. So you might have to reel me in and say, okay, let's get back to this or that or whatever. But so yeah.
I can tell I've already had a lot to drink, because suddenly I'm just hearing in my head, Lord, I was born a rambling man.
Cheers.
Okay, cheers.
Spontaneous song. Cheers.
Cheers. Okay, so
that's the first time I've broken into song on one of these yet. What am I doing wrong with my life?
You haven't been on many of them yet.
That's true. There's plenty of time.
Well, I'm going to try real hard to not break into song, so that way it makes everybody happy.
You're allowed. I actually haven't broken into song yet, but
it could happen. Because actually, that's something that we'll talk about a little bit in Watchmen. It incorporates music from the different eras that actually help the story along. So I didn't say I've got my Night Owl shirt on.
I need to show off your cowl behind you.
Yep, and this is part of my. Well, hello. This is part of my my Night Owl costume that I have. That's
and
actually
placed in a picture here.
Yeah, there you go. So, are we going to insert a picture? Can we do that? That would be cool. Okay,
send me awesome. Your favorite.
Okay, cool. So anyway, Night Owl. Oh, so the thing about this Night Owl, which I really love, this is the Night Owl from the movie. and we're not going to be talking about the movie.
Yeah, that would require a whole.
It could be a whole different. We could do a. So here's the thing, if you're unfamiliar with Watchmen, there's this story, and I will keep doing this because that's just visual aids. It was actually originally done in a DC one shot in 1985, and it was all, and then they broke it down in 1986. I think it was, I want to say that's what it was, into a 12-issue maxi series, and that's the first time I saw it, was when it was coming out in the original books. And unfortunately, I don't have those anymore. It's one of those things that just wasn't smart of me to not keep them. But anyway,
you could have no way.
I mean, that's a whole nother story right there. But anyway, so there's this story, which is the main story. There is the movie. There is the TV show on HBO, which, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. There is the prequels that DC Comics did a while back, before Watchmen, called Before Watchmen, and I actually have those as well. And then there is the
Doomsday Clock stuff.
Yeah, Doomsday Clock, which, hang on. Doomsday Clock. So really, I think the easiest thing for us to do is simply just talk about the original, and I maybe make a comment here and there about, well, this is different in the movie and this is that. But yeah, we would be here. I would be like 10 episodes of, trying to get all this stuff wrangled together. And we're not going to do that. Interestingly enough, just the original Watchmen story is actually three different narratives at the same time. Let me say this: spoilers, lots and lots of spoilers. If you have not read Watchmen, stop, go read it, and then come back and watch.
Also, it's like 40 years old now. If you haven't read Watchmen, what are you doing with your life?
You just never know.
I'm trying to catch up on the last 80 years of X-Men. Thank you very much. I'm doing with my life.
Fair. You get a pass.
Anyway,
you know what?
All right.
That's the beauty of comics. You get half the story from drunk people, and it's entertaining.
There you go. Yay. So the three different parts in the original Watchmen story is what I call the story proper, which is just the main narrative. There is a completely separate story called the Black Freighter, which I'll tell you a little bit about as we go along. And then there is
all this to myself, and then remembered that we're recording. I can just watch it.
So we're Black Freighter. Okay, so Black Freighter, and then the other part is there's actually a number of, for lack of a better term, inserts or asides where it gives you different information from the universe. So and I'll kind of talk about those as we go through the story. So I guess I'm not sure the best way to start, whether it's just with the story or because there's actually some really interesting history to the creation of this.
Let's let's start with the history of the creation.
Okay.
That's my
Right.
Right. So in 1983, and I don't have that memorized. I have that over here in my notes. In 1983, DC Comics acquired a number of characters from the defunct Charlton Comics line. This included the Blue Beetle, the Peacemaker, the Question,
Yes.
a number of these characters. So originally, when
I'm sorry.
okay.
I said R.I.P. Vic Sage, and then I asked if he's alive again since the reboot.
I'm not sure. That's a good question. That's a whole nother.
I'm like the dog and Up.
Yeah.
Squirrel.
No, I'm a big question. I'm a big
I
question.
said the dog, but yes, his name is Doug.
I'm a big Question fan from not only from the comic books but from the Justice League Unlimited cartoons.
He was the MVP.
Him and when him and Huntress kind of were a pair, and they did that was I enjoyed it tremendously. Yep.
Huntress was my girl.
So the original idea of Watchmen, Alan Moore had, was that he was going to write a story about superheroes, but he was going to write a story about superheroes that were that had all the same idiosyncrasies and concerns and kinks and all the other things that everybody has, but now we're putting them to these guys. Now he was going to use the Charlton characters.
Yep.
DC decided that they really didn't want him to do that because, quite honestly, once he had put those peccadillos, for lack of a better term, with some of those characters, they were going to stick. And they had some plans for some of those characters. So anyway, so if you look
at them dirty, we want to play with them.
Right. So if you look at some of those characters, if you look at some of the characters from Watchmen, they're really Rorschach is the Question. Mm-hmm. with a few changes and but Rorschach is the Question. You've got Night Owl, who is the Blue Beetle. You've got the Comedian, who's the Peacemaker. You've got Dr. Manhattan, who is actually Captain Atom. If you didn't know that, Captain Atom who ended up being in the Justice League and all those different things, Captain Atom was the template for Dr. Manhattan. Again, so and then you've got Ozymandias, who was Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. You have that. Really, what's kind of cool is Silk Spectre was actually oh shoot, who was she? Hang on, I got a note. So she was actually started to be based on Nightshade, but she actually became more of a akin to Phantom Lady or even Black Canary in the way that she was. See, there you go.
I'm gonna bring up the Black Canary connection.
You can't mention Black Canary.
But see, that was the thing, is when you get into the story of the Silk Spectre and you get into the whole Watchmen story, a lot of these characters are second generation heroes, and that is where like Silk Spectre was the daughter of the first Silk Spectre, same as Black Canary was the daughter of the first Black. At least back in the
and there's not very many mother-daughter, especially
exactly. That's back in the pre-crisis days, which is a whole nother ball of wax. All right, so now I'm lost.
Back to Watchmen. Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So we've kind of talked about some of the characters in Watchmen, and those characters were the crime busters. Now, there is nowhere, here's a little interesting tidbit for you. There is nowhere in any of, at least to my knowledge, in any of the stories where the group of Night Owl and Rorschach and Comedian and Silk Spectre and Dr. Manhattan and Ozymandias are called the Watchmen. They are called the Crime Busters. That was a group that Captain Metropolis, who was one of the original Minutemen, tried to start up. And then the Watchmen was basically sort of later on, it was more of a graffiti thing about who watches the Watchmen, talking about them being, but we'll get to that.
Kind of a pejorative term. Is that the right word, or am I just drunk?
Pejorative? It means casting a negative
That's
connotation.
what I meant.
Yes.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
SAT words. Peccadillo.
Very good.
Yeah. We got it.
Yeah. Okay. So
right now.
Let's back up.
No.
We're gonna. There's two groups that we're going to talk about. The Crime Busters, who are the late 60s, early 70s heroes, and the Minutemen, who are the original mystery men from the 1940s. Okay, so
as opposed to the mystery men from the 1990s that had that super cool Smash Mouth soundtrack.
You know what?
Bring that
okay, all right. That's a whole nother deal because I love that movie and I love the comics. The thing about Watchmen is as you read it and as you look at it, it's sort of set up very much like real world comic books. That you had the golden age and you had the silver age, and then you had the sort of the gritty in the 80s, because it came out in the 80s and that's when the real gritty stuff was happening. It really kind of showed. So let's talk about the story, and I will kind of talk about characters as we sort of go through the story. Because the story is actually.
I need you to tell the whole story without mentioning the characters.
Okay.
All right. Really, you were scaring him.
All righty, Miss Smarty Pants. All right. No. Because from now on, I'm going to start saying the guy with the hat and the guy with the mustache, and when people say, "What the heck is he talking about?" I'm going to point at you.
It's going to be on you.
I ruined the whole episode.
Definitely.
Okay. So no, seriously. Right. So the story starts.
In a box. For the viewers at home, I do not keep her in a box.
Nope, I'll just put my gimp hood back on, zip it all the way up.
Oh my gosh.
You know what?
This is not why she's not been in many episodes. She's been planning her wedding. Okay, go on.
So this, where'd it go? This is what I was looking for.
Yes.
All right. That, kiddos, this is original. This is from 1986.
What?
Okay.
Amazing.
I got this at the very first comic book convention I ever went to in Dallas, Texas, in like 19, oh goodness, it was like 1987, and I was young, and it was in like a Days Inn or something like that, in their nothing but nerds with long tables with long boxes on them, and everybody was trading comic books, and they had a few people that had little things, and I bought that, and I have hung on to that for this. So that's the. So the reason that I pulled that out
for this night.
Do I?
Wait, you hung on to it waiting for this night.
Exactly. Because I knew that this was going to happen, that there was going to be a point or I was going to be on a YouTube video with lovely ladies talking about comic books, and it was going to be tremendously impressive that I had this little piece of metal and plastic.
Seriously impressed. Like you have no idea.
So, all right, seriously. So we haven't even started talking about the story yet, and I mean that's
comics. This is how it goes.
The story opens with in New York City in 1985. There are two police officers who are looking at a crime scene. Basically a older gentleman in his late 50s, early 60s had been murdered. How he got murdered was he got thrown out a window of a building and he went splat on the sidewalk. So they were going through talking about what had happened or what they thought had happened, and the fact that that this guy's name was Edward Blake, and it looked like from some of the things in the apartment that he was a government employee. He worked with the government. There were pictures of him with Vice President Ford, and there were pictures of him with different people in political realm, and then they started talking about the fact that they were trying to figure out if it was a robbery or something like that, and they were basically it was a chance for giving some exposition, because they were talking about the fact that at one point in time there were costumed heroes and they didn't really want them involved in the situation, and there was a thing called the Keene Act, which had outlawed quote unquote superheroes, and that they were concerned that Rorschach, who was pretty much the only non-sanctioned hero that was still operating, would stick his nose into the thing. So they were just basically trying to sweep everything under the carpet and say, let's get this done. So after that scene plays out, the next scene is actually Rorschach coming up to the apartment, using a good old fashioned Batman grappling gun to go up, and so then he starts looking around, and he being very much like the Question, being very very what's the word I'm looking for, being very suspicious, very thinking that there's something going on, and he finds that there is a hidden latch inside Edward Blake's closet. And when he opens it up, there's a uniform in there and lots of guns and plus a picture of the original Minutemen, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which was the original superhero team. And so he starts to realize that this guy was the comedian. And we'll find out later that Edward Blake was not only the comedian, but he was a government operative that was one of the two super people that were still sanctioned by the government to operate after the Keene Act, which was, and again, it's already gotten confusing, and this is the Watchmen. So
Act was not keen for superheroes.
Do what?
The Keene Act was not.
Yeah,
keen.
it was not keen for. It was not a keen time for superheroes. So then what happens at that point?
Thank you. I'm quite proud of that.
Is Rorschach decides that this is a somebody's out to kill former heroes. And so this is a conspiracy so he decides he is going to go start talking to all the previous heroes to warn them that someone is trying to kill them. So as he does this, it starts to introduce more characters. He goes to visit Night Owl, who is a composite of Blue, like I said, of Blue Beetle and Batman and several other characters, who is retired. And the reason the reason that I brought the smiley face button out in the first place is because this was on the sidewalk. This was the comedian's badge, and it was on the sidewalk, and the little blood spot is supposed to be his blood, and that's kind of a running visual throughout the story, and throughout other stories that connect to it later on.
Very iconic.
Okay. So anyway, so he goes to see Night Owl, who is actually Night Owl number 2, and he is kind of living the life of the retired. He retired without anyone without giving his identity. So he's living in obscurity and kind of a little bit overweight and a little bit, disgruntled and not happy with the world. And he spends most of his evenings hanging out with the original Night Owl, who's from the Minutemen, and they end up, commiserating about all kinds of stuff and that kind of thing. So anyway, Rorschach goes to talk to him and says, "Hey, we think there's something, I think there's something going on. People somebody's trying to kill us, and possibly an old villain or whatever." He's very into very into this superhero villains and everything with Rorschach is black and white. There is no shades of gray. There is no well, it could be this or it could be that. Everything is right or wrong. And that will actually come into play as we go through this, because each one of the characters in Watchmen has a different view of society, has a different view of people and what their motivations are and that kind of thing. With Rorschach, everything is black and white. With Night Owl, everything is about trying to do the right thing, trying to placate people and make people happy and do the things that are expected. And that's actually one of the reasons that I have identified sort of with that character, because he very much tries to make everything okay with everybody. He tries to be the peacemaker and those kinds of things. And then sometimes he gets very down because it's just not, he doesn't have the ability to do the things that some of the other characters can do. So after he finishes up with Night Owl, then he goes to see Adrian Veidt, who was Ozymandias, who is basically listed as the smartest man in the world. And there's as you go through the story, you get a lot of backstory about him, and he really is, just, using 95% of his brain and just, basically he was rich and he gave all of his stuff away and followed the path of Alexander the Great and basically completely rebuilt his fortune like that. So Rorschach goes to him to tell him the same thing, and saying that Edward Blake was the comedian and he was assassinated, and there's a mask. He was calling it a mask killer, which, so that's and Ozymandias says, well, Edward Blake and Dr. Manhattan both work for the government, so there could have been any number of reasons that somebody could have, but Rorschach is still very black and white. This has got to be the reason why. And so he finishes up with him, and then he sneaks onto a government installation to see Dr. Manhattan, who is living on a government installation with Sally Giuseppe, who is no, not Sally. I'm sorry. That's embarrassing.
No, it's all right. You're
hang
allowed.
on, Will. Yeah, it's not Sally. It's Lori. Sally
Sally
is her
Cutter.
mother. Yeah, Lori is Lori is Dr. Dr. Manhattan's lady friend, for lack of a more descriptive term. I'm not sure if we're PG-13 here or not.
Oh, we are rated. I have a mouth on me.
Okay. So
you've seen the episodes. I have a mouth on me.
She's his lady friend that is involved in romantic entanglements. How's that?
That's beautiful.
So we'll go with that. Yeah. So Rorschach goes to visit them to tell them that Edward Blake is dead and he was the comedian. Of course, Dr. Manhattan knows all this because Dr. Manhattan knows everything. Okay. The thing about Dr. Manhattan is Dr. Manhattan does not live in linear time. Okay. He bounces all over, which makes it a little bit like a Quentin Tarantino movie. It's just like Pulp Fiction, where you're going all over the different places and then you come back to here, and that's Dr. Manhattan.
I feel like if it was really a Quentin Tarantino movie, there'd be like blue Dr. Manhattan blood all over the place. But
wait, we're not done yet. There is blue Dr. Manhattan private parts all over the place.
I saw that
because he's naked. But we'll get to that later. So anyway, so he goes to tell them the same thing, and Dr. Manhattan really just doesn't care. He's so beyond, being concerned about all this kind of stuff that he just, it's just, and then Lori, on the other hand, is really angry because Rorschach is a technically a wanted criminal, and she never liked him in the first place. Plus the fact that he's there talking about Edward Blake, who she has a history with, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So that
books are soap operas.
It's all it all meshes like exactly.